Hey everybody, it's Dr. Boz, and we are live on Tuesday night here at 6 p.m. Eastern Time from Tampa. Tonight, we will be talking more about habits and who are you and who do you want to become. Habits shape our identity, and that's why it's more important to have more than a checklist when we do the ketogenic diet. We need you to identify who you want to become, identify that strength found deep inside that you're trying to find and better. We want you to be following a few things we wrote in the email this week. One of them is to challenge you. And if you read the email, you'll know that we want you to find that one habit that your future best self does and write it down. And then find that one that sabotages yourself and write that down. We're going to unpack that much further today and walk you through the Atomic Keto series we are doing here on the Dr. Boz Channel. But first, we're going to do some things that are traditional here on the show, and one of those is to check some numbers. While I do that, I am going to remind people of a few things. I have some speaking things that are coming up in this. It's like a season of speaking events, and one of them is just up the street from where I live now, called Keto Orlando, and I have not only a lecture that I've been working on, but I also, if you sign up on the site, I'll walk through that in just a minute here when I have a couple hands. You can use a promo code Dr. Boz to get some tickets off, and maybe we can meet. I have my blood sugar coming there. And, I might not have a blood. Oh, no. Oh, got enough. Dang. Well, it says my blood sugar's over 300, so I better try that again. I'll try that one more time. Ketones are 1.7. Let me try my sugar again. I don't know what happened there. That's a lot of sugar. I will wait till that is dripping, and in the meantime do this. I have one review that I want to read tonight, and it has a lot to do with identity, so I thought that would be a great way to improve our conversation. And this Amazon writer, it still says 108, which I don't know if I believe that, but 108 and 117. I am 48 hours fasted, so that's a little high blood sugar for 48 hours fasted. So this patient writes in, or this person writes in, not a patient, person, writes in and says, I cannot say enough about this book. It is the best book for changing yourself and life I have ever read. At 62 years old and 340 pounds, I was sick. I had no more enthusiasm for life. I was tired, had no hope after trying so many diets and only gaining it all back plus some. I'm done. 1 year later, I have lost 120 pounds and am still losing weight by following the Dr. Boz step-by-step program outlined in this book. I have a lot more to lose, but I feel better and I am not sick or on medication, and I have great hope for the future. Someday, I hope to see Dr. Boz and give her a big hug. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, thank you for writing that review. Again, one of the best ways to say thank you is to leave that book review. It is very helpful, and it helps other people find the book. And I do hope you'll meet me. I think I have it on this one. Nope, I gotta do one more button. And so far, I don't have anybody complaining about sound, so that's good. I see some folks from Minnesota. I'll tell you, I've never had people want to visit me so much until I moved to Tampa. It's amazing how much more they want to visit me than when I was living in your neck of the woods. Let's see. I think I have... Oh, I know where I put it. Here we go. I just need to click over here. Okay, so this is the other place that you can meet me. And this is the low-carb event that is called Keto Orlando. It is August 4th through the 7th. And the URL is ketoorlandosummit.com. And if you click on buy tickets there, you can put in a Dr. Boz promo code, but more importantly, come be a part of this community that really is not just growing, but shrinking. They are getting healthy and they are getting amazing results, not just by a flash in the pan change, but especially if you're following us here on the Dr. Boz channel, we are trying to give excellent, heartfelt, and genuine guidance on how to help that patient or that person that just wrote the book review to never have to go on another diet again, to never have to go back to that mentality of illness again. And these folks at Keto Orlando, here's the ladies that are in charge, and I've spoken with over the phone, and I actually haven't met them yet. These are some of the speakers that are there, and I'm super excited. I'm super excited to be part of the lineup, and I'm working on my on what I'm going to be talking about at that event. And it is one of my favorite ways to really geek out on some of the science and the slides that that I used to put into hour-long videos, but it turns out YouTube doesn't like that, so we've got them into short videos. But I'm totally craving to be in front of a live audience so that I can have an hour to tell you what I want to tell you, and really, truly improve people's lives by continuing to educate them. So as I look at our lineup for tonight, I do have the continued series that we're on. I am going to add some bubbly water to my little bit of ketone drink here. I am doing the raspberry again tonight. I actually have other flavors in the office. I'm so excited. But that should be good. And we have kids home from college this week on spring break, and they're delighted to be here. We had some guests come through, and they were, again, looking for that sunshine. So tonight we are on part 3 of what James Clear used to teach teach how to change habits, which is atomic habits. And what I teach on this channel and my team helps me with is we teach how to do keto the right way for the best way for a lifetime. Yes, we reverse medical problems with healthy keto living. And so we are going to do a smash of atomic habits and keto education over this next series. And we are diving in. If you haven't signed up for our emails, go to bozmd.com and sign up for that newsletter. We really are trying to engage and show you our stories from our team, as well as use those emails to kind of prepare in a written form what we're going to talk about on the show. And of course, our outline is to use some of that strategy that's in Atomic Habits to help people do atomic keto. And really, we have a couple of themes for tonight, which is be the designer of your life, not just the consumer of it. And every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. And these are just some of the genuine themes that we have as we cultivate our own habits and try to be as open and honest to sharing what that looks like in a real life format by sending you an email each week, and then trying to do lives that walk a little closer through the lesson and hopefully get you some excellent guidance on how to genuinely change behavior while using one of the best chemistry sets I've ever advised patients through, which is to use the ketogenic diet to reverse chronic medical illnesses. We do have some videos that have come out the last week, and we have a few more in the bank that we continue to try to use those shorter formats. So if you haven't jumped on board and clicked the subscribe, we do actually want you to follow us and turn on that little bell so you can see our content that comes out. I think each time we do a video, our team gets a little better at this, and we are trying really hard to condense it down into the attention span of the YouTube world. So thanks for cheering us on. So if somebody would double check what my Dr. Boz ratio is, even with a blood sugar of 108, I still would like to know what the number is. And I am going to start here while I hop over, and we have just the series that we're going to talk about. If you have questions, this is the place that I try to do this lesson in about the next 15 or 20 minutes and really then unpack some of the questions that you guys post here. So I have a team sorting through the questions, trying to see that we don't answer the same questions every week, but we really do try and knock down some of those curious feathers that you all keep posting, and we will, the sooner you post the question, the higher on the list you'll be when we get to that at the end of the show. All right, let's take a closer look at this here. Okay, I know what I was doing right. Let's go to turn that off. And yes, this is what I wanted. Okay, yes. So this is week 3, and we are talking about this identity mindset. Excuse me. So if you look at James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, he really does open up the chapter in the first 3 ways to kind of shift how you think about addressing health issues. For 20 plus years, I've been advising patients, and they show up saying, Doc, here's what I want to have. Here's what my plan is. And my goal is to get them away from me, to help them find enough health that you can see me once a year for a maintenance visit, but the health problems are gone. The maintenance of keeping you healthy is much easier at that point. But also, how do you do that? They usually show up saying, Doc, I want off these blood pressure medicines, or Doc, I want to lose the weight, or I'm tired of taking an antidepressant. And you're saying, okay, then we got to get your body working well. And that's where I start to, think of that person that wrote in saying, I was 340 pounds and I was giving up. I didn't feel well. You can hear that identity in that review saying, she really was, she was dying on the inside. And then a shift of chemistry from the inside now has her changing how she thinks about herself. So as we venture into week 3, now I want to change one more little thing here that has this turn off and see if I can, here we go, turn this bad boy on. There we go. We are going to ask people to say, okay, stop thinking about the goal. Not that goals aren't important, but that should not be your focus. Instead, we focus on systems. What does it look like to set up a life that really is healthy and is reversing these medical problems, is getting you to the place where you don't need to see the doctor? We went on to say there's a few blind spots that people have when they're trying to address a habit. It is why we're pushing you to say, imagine who you want to be, and find a habit that future self really does exemplify, that they are designing their world, not just consuming it, that they are forging through the kind of world and life they want to be. And then we said, and then find one of the habits you do that will sabotage your future self, one that you do. But this was one of the little lessons we did the first week, saying sometimes you don't realize what you're doing, or when you've are walking into a bad habit, walking into a sabotage, if you would. And I ask you to put a note card together and put the word P.L.A.T.E on it and say, when you see that you've just screwed it up, when you see that you've just fallen off the wagon, or you're doing something that you're like, I did it again, I don't want to do that. Identifying these 5 factors really helps to pull your vision of what you're trying to change out of the moment, and really writing down the person that you did it with. The L stands for the location you're at. Activity is what are you doing while you did that habit. What time of day is it? This has a lot to do with some of the keto stuff that I see people run into. And 5, what is the emotion you feel that might have sparked what happened? Writing these little note cards in the moment, or at least right after the moment. Don't try to do it when you go to bed at night. Put the note card in your pocket. Gather at least 5 of them, because you will start to see a pattern that there are places that sabotage you. And as we look at what this book and what we are coaching our team to do, it is incredible how well you can shift things if you can identify them. So we went through that in the first week and how important that was. Last week we said, all right, if you look at the world of most diets, or most people that are venturing towards a habit change, they will say, here is what I want to be. Here is what I want. I'd like to, read more books. I'd like to, be a writer. And they start with the outcome first, instead of starting with the identity first. So as you look at the mind shift that we're asking you to do, we want you to imagine the identity of who you want to become. That design your world, not merely consume it, is meant to help you say, what is your dream? What is your goal? And it doesn't just show up accidentally. When people show up on the ketogenic diet, they last for 6 weeks because the chemistry really does change that much in their body. But if we're looking to forge into a healthier version of you, one that really enjoys the life because of their health, I need you to find that identity. I need you to be as specific as possible in that identity. And instead of focusing on the outcome or even the process at this point, that identity needs to become all consuming to say, who do you want to be? Who is your future self? And we talked about that a little bit last week in the email, and a little bit more again in this email this week, saying how important that was. And we know that the next several sections are areas of what James Clear uses to take these things we've just done in a couple weeks, finding those places where you've screwed it up and writing down your plate, person, location, activity, time, and emotion. You write down your plates. And now we're going to show you, again, the full strategy of what this book really unpacks. We're not going to go into detail here. This is simply an overview. But if you've read the book, or if you haven't done the audiobook, I think he's got a great voice and reads it really well. This is what we're going to be using while we answer keto questions, continue to teach you about keto. But we don't just play keto. We really are trying to couple this with a change in mentality, a change in how can you approach some of those goals you've had before, some of those places where you have reached and said, I am gonna do this, and then you get sabotaged. And there's some, we'll show you how to crack the code, and I really just think Atomic Habits does a great job at doing that. All right, so the first thing that happens is when people are trying to change a behavior, something happens that cues them. The cue is step one. The cue leads to a craving. Excuse me. That craving is also a response to the cue that you'll see or be triggered by the cue, and it leads to an emotion. It leads to a want. That then is a response, and that then leads to a reward. This is the cycle that is outlined in the book. And when you first see these words, you're like, what are you talking about? What does this have to, how does this work? And we're not going to try to unpack that all this week. We are really looking for you to join us on this discovery, but I think outlining the overview, where we know that when people have difficulties changing behaviors, there's usually a problem phase where they're getting a cue and they're doing something. The cue can be that they're happy and they still make a mistake. Sometimes it can be that they're disappointed, they're lonely, or that there's candy sitting in front of them and they like the taste of that. But those cues lead to cravings. And when we look at the cues, when you're trying to build that new habit, find that new version of you and imagine her in your future self, we want a cue that's obvious. Making a cue obvious is going to help you improve a habit. But in the reverse, if you're trying to get rid of a habit, those are the kinds of cues we're trying to make invisible. That leads to the craving, saying when you crave something that you know is attractive. And we're going to unpack this more in the weeks to come. I don't want you to find this too confusing, but when you're trying to get rid of a craving, that's when we make it unattractive. So those two problems on the top, those two sections on the top are for the problem phases of our habits, where I don't know how I fell off. I did so good for 6 weeks and then I fell off. And those are usually where the problems own this cycle. Or the problem is the bad habit of the task you don't want is no longer invisible. It's super obvious. It's constantly tempting you. And that it's way more attractive to just give in and deal with a craving than it is to change it to a craving of something that's new and attractive towards your future self. The bottom parts are the response and the reward, and those have to do with the solution phase of habit forming. When it's a habit you're building, a new habit that you're building, we want you to make it easy. We want you to make it difficult when it's a habit you're not building. And again, we're going to go through this more in the weeks to come. And last, make it satisfying or unsatisfying when it comes to those habit, the reward solutions. When we look at several of the places where I think back in at changing our own identity, changing an identity that really did link to a habit that isn't just a flash in the pan for several of my patients, but several of people who come in and say, Doc, I need to kick this habit. In internal medicine, especially working with a host of broken brains over the years, addiction is very common. And that review that I picked tonight was specific because the way that reviewer talked about how ill she was, you could almost feel the identity as you read her review. When you flip that and you watch people who come into a medical facility to try and kick a habit, sex, drugs, rock and roll, cocaine, find an addiction, and it's out there. And when they work to reverse it, getting them to identify their future self was something I didn't frame that way for years. Reading the Atomic Habits and looking at the parallels for what I would recommend now, if I could go back for those 15 years of pretty intense therapy with medical treatment, I would have totally used this mindset to say, before we ever talk about never drinking again, before we ever talk about ever using again, or whatever habit they're trying to break, I would have had them more clearly identify their future self. I focused a lot, and you can see that in my Keto Continuum book on their why, what motivates them, that true strength to drive them through pain or difficulty, and really holding on to that motivation and clearly outlining it before we stepped down the path of change. Without having those histories where you could almost identify within the first couple of weeks which patients were headed towards a really rocky road, and they couldn't shift the language of how they talked about themselves. They couldn't find that future self anywhere in their minds, and they got stuck. They really did get stuck. That when we look at some of the cue, craving, response, reward things that they crave something that was usually an acceptance that was so profound that there's no way the human world could offer that without a lot of spirituality that needed to be developed that they had no idea how to do, and that attention of wanting to be accepted had so much power over that reflex to reach for a substance that separated them from this current world, and they were off track with seeking a reward that was never going to be sustainable. But I love how in this book we can flip that. When you look at the true scripting that you have the power over, saying, yes, I have been 50 pounds overweight, I have been 100 pounds overweight for so many years. And just like the gal that wrote that review, 320 pounds, she's lost 120 pounds in 1 year. And coupling that change in her body shape, along with what must have been reversal of several medical problems, along with how she must think about herself now. I mean, she must be thinking about herself differently now in order to have that sustainable change. And we know that when every time she looks at a craving or looks at a temptation, that her years of having processed food, of not eating a ketogenic diet, led to a mental vote that she was the overweight person, that she was going to have these medical problems forever, that she was never going to find a way to lose the weight. And even when she lost the weight, there was something, first of all, her chemistry was a bit off, meaning it's really difficult to lose weight and keep it off without awakening their endocrine system and really sparking that rise in how their hormones can help them to lose this weight. But she didn't have that. And without that identity shift in her mind, she was going to gain the weight back. That helping someone lose 120 pounds in 1 year, I can tell you that before I started using the ketogenic diet, I had a few patients that had lost 100 pounds, almost all of them. I mean, I can count on one hand how many patients lost 100 pounds without surgery. And now I've lost count of how many folks have written in and said, geez, doc, I've done that. I've lost 100 pounds. And with that, we want to show this woman who wrote the review, as well as you, how do you shift the mentality so it stays, so that this is the last time she ever loses that weight. So if you haven't picked up the book, there's a link to it in the show notes. That I really like the audiobook. We are only about 55 pages in, and we are going to use some of those lessons as we walk through saying, I really do want you to follow along. And if you're trying to change a behavior, if you're looking to say, okay, I lost the weight, and maybe you're stalled out on the ketogenic diet, maybe you are on your way to losing 100 pounds, and you never want to do this again. You want to stay the course. We've given you some pretty specific things in that email this week. We've challenged you to say, find the habit, find that behavior that your future self must do, that really is a core part of that DNA for who that healthy person is, and then write that down. Put it on paper, and then find the habit that sabotages you, that you say, yeah, I do really well until, and then fill in the blank. We've got some steps in the future weeks ahead on how to address that and what we're going to use those for. So I encourage you to join us in this process of unpacking. You'll hear about our habits, you'll hear about some of our mistakes, and you'll also be able to find what I think is one of the best long-term courses of changed behavior. So we're going to get over to some of the questions right now. I see the team is doing that as we speak. I do want to just give a little shout out for this morning's support group that I'm super thankful for. That since I've been coming, I'm new to Tampa, I'm a new Floridian, and I think we're now on, well, it's the second week in March, so it must be about 10 weeks of our new support group here in Tampa. If you're looking for a ketogenic support group, I do it as a community service, getting to know the community I've moved to, but also as an act of service for other people who want a support group. Today we had a gentleman who has been coming since the first of the year. Most weeks he's there. I'm not sure he's missed one. It may be one, but either way, he said, since I've been coming, he's fasted a total of 22 days. And he goes, he didn't feel that he was that overweight, but he's lost about 15 pounds, gone from about 200 to 205 pounds, and he's lost 4 inches around his waist. And today he presented, you could hear in his story that he's really struggled with some blood pressure issues. We talked about blood pressure this morning at that support group, and had and linked that to some of the identity changes that I think we pushed him a little bit. He's gotten pretty good at these 48-hour fasts, and we've pushed him to say, I think you just announced to the group that you're ready for the 72-hour fast. So again, we try to be a little playful, but very important to have a support group. And if you're looking for one, 4809 North Armenia here in Tampa from 8 to 9 at the bowling alley called the Pin Chasers. And we are super excited that they are willing to keep us a nice warm place, or cool place, I guess, in the summer to visit. All right, let's go to our questions here for Dr. Boz. So we've got Julie, who writes in and says, Dr. Boz, I would love some reading material on the things you were discussing in your videos, getting cold when fasting. I actually read this comment when I was preparing and thought, oh, they want to read that? So if you haven't checked this out, there is a video that came out on Sunday that answering one of the questions that comes up a lot, which is, why do people get chilly why do they get cold? Why do they shiver when they fast? And, I wonder where it is I learned that. So when I read this, I'm like, gosh, I think it must have been one of the physiology papers that I don't even know where I first sourced that. But the answer comes from what happens when the body has gone without food for several days, especially a healthy body. So when people are in a standard American diet and they drop the calories down to a low calorie diet, under 300 calories, which some would call fasting, but on this channel we don't use the word fasting until you get to 36 hours. Otherwise, it's called time restricted eating. But if they're fasting and they're pushing to that 48th hour, especially if you're trying to get, that first time of a 36-hour fast, that first or second time of a 48-hour fast, you'll often find a shivering or a coldness that happens. And people think it's abnormal, like I'm screwing up my thyroid or my metabolism's doing something wrong. And the video goes on to show, no, that's what's supposed to happen. When you look at the core places where your blood flow goes during a time of fasting, it really does pull that blood flow to the core areas where the fuel is stored. Those are your fat cells. So the organs get, of course, a good vasodilation when you're fasting, but also your fat storages get a majority of, or an increased blood flow, and that can rob the blood flow from your fingers and your extremities, giving you a shivering feeling or a cold feeling. It's also a sign that your metabolism is doing something that it hasn't done before. It is a stress to your metabolism. So although people think, this must be dangerous, this is bad, it's actually what you're trying to get done when you fast. The purpose of fasting, you see on the show, I fast every week. And the fasting isn't just because I like to go without food. I actually love food. But one of the metabolism stressors that I do is to deny food for 48 hours. And I still do get chili every once in a while. So you can, especially if I do the workout on Mondays. Mm-hmm. So I'm sorry I don't have a literature answer for you there, but hopefully a little further explanation gets you an answer there. Let's see. I want to go back to here. All right. Second question is from Laura. And it says, I am currently, 45 hours in a 72-hour fast. Ketones yesterday were 0.4 and blood glucose was 102. Today it's 0.3 and 88. Does this mean insulin resistance for me? I was keto until about with COVID and then binged. So what she's seeing that metabolic stress with her body. So she's in a fast right now and her body's saying, hey, why aren't you eating? And her body is responding. And she's like, well, wait a minute. My blood sugar's still 102 and my blood glucose is 0.4. Yeah, that's a little high for 45 hours fasting. But as you can see just a few minutes ago, my blood sugar was inappropriately high. I don't know why. When you're looking at the points of data of glucose and ketones during a time without food, when you see those ketones going down, they're not zero, they're 0.4. So your body is trying to make the resources that it's asking for, and your glucose of 102 says, yep, it is finding that glucose, whether it's still using that stored glycogen that's in your muscle cells, or your liver will be emptied first, but then your muscle cells. And so you watch what happens from, can somebody do the math for me? What is the Dr. Boz ratio of 102 and divide by 0.4, and then take 88 and divide by 0.3, and just watch to see what that Dr. Boz ratio does. I'll watch for that in the chat here in just a second. But looking at that metabolic stress, in fact, I think it was actually somebody else in the support group who said, hey, I'm new to keto, and he comes in with these numbers that says I'm fasting and my numbers are terrible. But 2 days later, my keto numbers were great and my blood sugar was great. And that's what we talk about. When people do a fast, you are stressing the metabolism. And right now, Laura, your system is looking for any place it can find fuel. It's probably vasodilating to your fat cells and your organs. It's also keeping that blood filled with glucose enough to keep you feeling comfortable. I'm encouraged to see the 72 hours as a goal, because it is a little odd that at 48 hours, your ketones are still that low. So you can think of it in two ways. You're out of practice in making ketones. If you were keto for a while and then you got ill and it threw you off for a little bit, that's one explanation to what might be happening. But also, if insulin resistance really has been, it sneaks up on people. It happens to most people that have been more than 5 pounds overweight. Is their insulin just doesn't listen as well as it's supposed to. I have a really awesome video coming out this Friday on insulin resistance or insulin and how it acts differently in different stages. I hope it turns out as good in reality as it is in my mind. But the stress of your low ketones and those higher blood sugars, I'm so excited to hear what your numbers do in about 48 hours after you break your fast. So, all right. So Kathy, thank you for doing that math. She says 255 is your Dr. Boz ratio for the 0.4, and then it's 293 for the second day. Again, looking at pretty hard. Pretty high numbers for a Dr. Boz ratio that far into into a fast. I wonder what mine was. Oh, my Dr. Boz ratio is 63. So again, you might have a little insulin resistance going on there, Laura. Okay, so let's go back to Katie with 4 months of an average Dr. Boz ratio of 50 in the morning. First of all, that's a win. That's a huge. But also in a 4-month weight stall. I'm wondering, could carb creep cause a weight stall while I am simultaneously have great Dr. Boz numbers? Oh, I wish the answer was, oh, that'll never happen. Follow your Dr. Boz ratio and it'll be perfect. But that is, there is if you've had carb creep and you're stalled, especially if you've had insulin resistance before, excuse me. If you've had insulin resistance before, the carb creep causes your body to produce insulin. So I like to tell people that if you want another test to see if they're insulin resistant, look what happens when they snack. Just a few bites of food will overstimulate their insulin. And they'll know because they get into this craving cycle once they're doing really well, and then they have a few of those carbohydrates or a few of those snacks. And there's a video I did probably about a month ago, that talks about particle size. You know, when you look at what is stimulated by insulin and several other of the hormones, the amount of protein in a small particle size still produced a very intense amount of insulin, and the amount of fat in a powdered version still produced quite a insulin spike. So when I look at somebody who's saying, I'm keeping my Dr. Boz ratios really good, first of all, it's only going to take a little bit of improvement for you to see those answers if you in fact have that good of numbers in the morning. The carb creep can be what causes a weight stall, though. So that's where I push people to say on that Dr. Boz keto continuum, they find a place that they live. So I'm going to guess, Katie, that you found this place where you can just live there. You feel like you've got a rhythm, you've got really good numbers in the morning. And if you were at your ideal body weight, if you had no medical problems, I'd say hold strong. You're doing great. Keep it up. But if you've still got a goal to reach for, that's when we want you to be adding a time of zero food. 48 hours or 36 hours is a great beginning, but if you've got a really good rhythm and you're still having struggles with weight loss, keep that rhythm. Keep that rhythm for 5.5, 6 days a week. But for the one day, get that 36-hour fast in and watch what happens to your weight. It is impressive when they get stuck there and then they magically start moving again because their system is no longer being stimulated by those smaller. Okay, what alternate for magnesium bath if one doesn't have a bathtub? Well, I feel sorry for you. My son gives me such a bad time. Today I told him if he had a headache, he should go for a magnesium soak. Which he's on spring break. The last thing he wants to do is be inside right now. And I said, well, can't I just go in the ocean? I'm like, okay. Yeah, there's some minerals in the ocean. You could probably get some absorbed, but it is the concentration of magnesium that does get them. So, Mary Jane, I've answered this question in the past, and so I'll tell you some hacks that I did. I haven't done them since being here in Florida, but when I was in South Dakota, I would have a big garbage can under my desk that was full of water filled with magnesium, and I would heat up that. I would do writing for several hours, and when I would get the water really warm, the way I did that is a little embarrassing, but I would use the same water heater for a cow tank that my dad used to use to keep the cow tank from freezing in South Dakota. So anyway, so I'd put that in there, get the hot water nice and warm, pull it out. Don't put your feet in there with that thing in there. And I would put my feet in there for like 6 hours, and every few hours just heat it up again, and keep using that as a way to expose your skin to the magnesium. But if you can't do that and you're looking how to replace magnesium, I write about this in the book too. There are lots of forms of magnesium that you can consume. And I've looked at all of them. And there are minor differences between them, and it changes the cost and it changes access. And after reading all through that, my favorite way to help somebody with their magnesium is tiny little bits of magnesium over a long period of time. So we wanted something cheap, we wanted something with easy access, and we wanted something that didn't really have any flavor. So if you go to the corner 7-Eleven or the corner drugstore, you can find milk of magnesia, which is meant for people with constipation, and you can find an unflavored version. And if you put a capful in your water, it doesn't change the flavor, but you get a little bit of magnesium over time. That's probably one of my favorite hacks to get magnesium back in their life. I would actually Google magnesium float. I mean, my parents lived in a town of 2,000 people, not even 2,000, like 1,000 people, and they had a little town next to them with one magnesium float in the middle of nowhere. I mean, so the magnesium floats are actually are more common than they used to be. All right. I have this is a good question. I have somebody who just wrote in and asked about P.L.A.T.E, Iowa. I'll answer that question too. You guys can copy that and put that one in there. I'll do Jay's question next though. Let's go down to, here we go. All right, so I have read all about how good MCT oil is for brain health. I know that you have said your C8, C10 pills to get through the first weeks I keep taking them every day for brain health. Oh, that is exactly why I made them. All right, so I find that multiple check marks are really important when I go through the energy of making a product. That it's kind of a pain. There's a lot of work to making a product and getting the ones you want, and then putting my name behind it, which means a lot of research before I pull the trigger. But it was incredible, abundant amount of literature that talks about how important specifically C10 is for the brain. We know that C8 and C10, those are those fat chains that are 8 carbons long and 10 carbons long. I really push people. You can see on my product. Let me just grab it really quick. So yeah, I have a new label so you can see into the bottle. I think that turned out really pretty. But this is the old label, and you're going to see that a little better on the camera here. I specifically point out that it is C8 and C10. And the reason I did that is there are many mislabels out there saying, hey, we have MCT, and they include a 12-chain fat called a C12 in their product. And the reason they do it is because it's a lot cheaper if you do that. On the same spectrum, there are several who have said, if you want the best production of ketones, just do straight C8. And although you do get good ketone production from C8 and C10, but maybe a little better from C8, what I wasn't willing to sacrifice was that I think the marketing is ahead of the science when it comes to only taking in C8. C8 and C10, and I think C10 had more data on how important that was for those who've got Alzheimer's, for preventing Alzheimer's, or for looking at overall brain health. Again, one of my passions is to educate and to treat patients with severe brain injuries. And as you look at that mechanics of getting nutrients past the blood-brain barrier and into a brain that's hungry, if they're insulin resistant, it's like it's very easy to mess it up. It's very easy to put a lot of effort and work towards improving their brains and improving their health, but the nutrients you're trying to get into their brain never made it past the blood-brain barrier. So C8 and C10 are the two fuels that get past the blood-brain barrier. This is the only product my husband takes on a regular basis is C8, C10. His family has brain issues as they age, and he's like, if that's one little thing I can do to prevent my brain from aging, and of course I've told him to do that. And he's allergic to every kind of sugar substitute, so the ketones he makes pretty good ketones, so he doesn't usually need to supplement those. But I said, this is what I would tell you to do for the rest of your life, is to supplement with that kind of a fat. Not only does it suppress appetite and it does increase those ketones, but there is some further neuro benefit that is not very clearly the mechanics of why it is a benefit. I don't understand yet. I have read the papers, I've looked at it, and I'm like, okay, let's keep thinking on that one. But it is something that I put my name on because I'm very passionate about people whose brains aren't working well, and what can we do to help them either recover some of that neuro processing or improve that for future brain health. Like, okay, you don't notice any memory problems, praise God. Let's prevent that. Let's prevent the next ones from happening. All right, I'm just going to look through some of those other chat questions that, I think that gets us pretty far down the, oh wait, I just didn't scroll down. Never mind, we've got lots of questions left. Let's go back to the questions. I was afraid nobody had any more questions. I was just not scrolling. Here we go. There we go. All right, so Diane says insulin stores fat, correct? Yes, think of it, insulin insulates. Some don't add MCT oil to their diet because they want their body to use their stored fat instead of their ingested fat. Does eating fat cause the body to keep stored fat? Oh, that is a great question. Oh, I should have scrolled and answered that with the last one. I'll do better. So looking at so here's how I recommend the supplement of MCT, is that especially if you've had severe health problems, if you've had any type of brain injury, whether that's a concussion or a chronic diabetes or high blood pressure or you've had some memory problems, those are the patients who just get yourself on 6 to 8 of those capsules a day. It's a handful, but it's easily transported, and meaning put it in a little baggie. Make sure you get your MCT in every day. But when people are saying, I want to lose weight, so why would I add fat? The specific reason for this fat is when you get that into that first section of the GI tract, so it just gets past the stomach and into the jejunum, your absorption of that fat does not require pancreatic enzymes. It does not require bile. It is absorbed, not digested. So it is a very quick intake of a fat that then goes into the liver and outspins ketones. Now, not every fat gets converted to a ketone, and that's how we can see those tagged chains of fat get past the blood-brain barrier and into the brain as a source of fuel. So again, looking at all of those reasons, like, oh, wait a minute, I'm trying to get fat from my cells. Yes, that's a good idea. And it is why, if you look at the strategy for Keto Continuum, we need your endocrine system helping you. So on the first few weeks of keto, I don't talk about any type of fat. I just want you having as much fat as possible. I want you shifting from a super high insulin state to a less high insulin state. And you really do produce less insulin when you are reducing the number of carbohydrates to less than 20. I push people to stay in whole foods and get away from as many processed low, small particle foods as possible. But either way, just getting the high fat for those first 6 to 8 weeks is really where that chemistry shifts. They start to feel better. Their brain just lights up on a functional MRI now. They are alive inside. And then you've got the long game, which is what we're talking about on this, Atomic Keto, Atomic Keto, I said it backwards. the habits of change really do come into play here, but understanding this chemistry a little bit better is helpful for them. So when I tell people not to take MCT C8C10 is when they're fasting. So we do not use the word fasting unless you make it past 36 hours. So if you're saying my goal is 36 hours and I'm going to fast, I really like them to have salt and water, salt and black coffee, and that's it. It would be the one day where I would skip the MCT oil and just have no calories go in during that fast. But the rest of the time, you do really notch that up a level for the production of ketones and that fuel that gets into the resources that are the most fragile for the patient. Meaning their brain, when I can level that brain function up through having a supplement on board, man, it really does change the trajectory. And they don't need it forever. They get to a stage. I mean, my husband's going to take it forever because he has a family history of declining brain elements in his family, and his wife is telling him to. But the problem of having having fat go in on a fasting day is it doesn't cause the stress to your metabolism that would cause you to shiver, the stuff we talked about a few minutes ago. Those metabolism differences, we want your body stepping it up to that next level. That we do want your body recruiting from those storages. And you get the best out of those patients who've suffered from lots of chronic obesity or chronic medical problems when they push into that 36-hour fast, when they really do get to a level of fasting. And I don't want anything messing up that metabolic stress when they're fasting. So that's the time I tell them not to have the supplement. But outside of that, I want their body producing higher ketones and having that enhanced nutrients to the brain. All right, so okay, Sue has a really good question. Yay. So she asked the P.L.A.T.E question. I actually got to get that guy some paperwork. Sue says, have you found out which day you are speaking in P.L.A.T.E? So is it the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th? So I'm not looking at a calendar right now, but I know I fly in on Wednesday. I speak on Thursday and Friday. And I think they're doing it at the auditorium. They're doing it at there's a college there in P.L.A.T.E. I think that's where he told me, and he's describing it, but I'm not familiar enough with the town to know exactly. I've been there before, but so I think it's the same place I was before. So it's the Thursday and Friday. I will fly in on Wednesday night, and I'm super excited because the last time I did it, we had shorter hours, and now I get to have longer hours, and I love giving the brains talk. So if you're looking, the town of P.L.A.T.E is they are not charging people that I know of, maybe for the lunch or something, like $15 for the lunch, but they really are about growing a community of improving their community's health, and nothing beats the brains course. So I feel so honored that they're asking me back. So thank you for asking that, Sue. All right, I just had a gastric band removed today. Wow, good for you. And want to begin keto. Do you have any advice? It was nearly impossible to eat meat before. But chocolate and ice cream went down well. Atta girl. Well, you're headed in the right direction. So yeah, this is a great place where gastric banding does change what foods get passed, right? Now, if they would eat just bone marrow, they would be, soft and get past the band, and they wouldn't get anything stuck. But yeah, meat, they almost have a mental aversion to it by the time they get to the part where they are especially if the band had been in there for a while. The first thing I would do actually is I would bite on MCT C8C10. I would see how well your body absorbs the fat. I had a gal today. Oh, she was so adorable. Must have been between 75 and 80 years old. She's been keto for a few months, and she has had a history of pancreatic cancer. Had the pancreas partially removed, and she doesn't produce the enzymes it takes to absorb those fats. And she is having an awful time with fats. So I tell this story because in a gastric band reversal, those first few weeks after the reversal, you are now going to stimulate those cells to do a job that they haven't been asked to do because the bolus or the volume of food was so limited. So one of the ways that your cells get stimulated is food goes by. When it is a higher bolus of food, you get a stretch effect with the stimulus of the type of food. And it really is a magic combination for producing these gastric enzymes. When you take off that band, stimulating those cells it can cause some loose stools, so beware. What I want you to do is wake up the cells that are in charge, or that are the mucus secreting, the ones that are going to deliver some of those pancreatic enzymes to your gut. All of those secretions will help you absorb the fats. And when I've seen people have reversals or takedowns, it's those first few weeks that they touch a fat and they get diarrhea. And I'm saying be very, very, very careful. One of these, bite it open and swallow the fat, then stop. And if you get diarrhea, the next day, bite it open and swallow the fat. The reason I tell you about the pancreatic cancer gal was she's been having 3 drops of MCT for about 2 months. And she's like, how do I get past this? I'm like, you need to go to the doctor. She needs pancreatic enzymes. She doesn't make the enzymes it takes to emulsify those fats. And I have a suspicion that she said for years after the pancreatic cancer and removal, she was able to eat fats, but then something changed and now she can't. So I said, don't lose hope, but you do live in the 21st century, and if you cannot absorb fats, we do have medicines that help that. So anyway, we're helping her find the right doctor around here. One more, and I think we got to the end, which is like a record for me. Let's go to the question one. Here we go. Karen writes in and says, does eating higher protein than fat knock you out of ketosis? Is that a bad thing, or is it okay if ketones are still 0.5? So the question is, what's your goal? If you're trying to lose weight, so in general, the amount of protein and fat's percentage is always going to be higher than the protein to keep people in a strong state of ketosis. So if I'm looking for what I would tell somebody who's got cancer, who are using a cancer protocol, I need them in advanced ketosis as quickly as possible, and we need to monitor some of the nutritional things that have to be replaced in order for them to do well for this whatever cancer treatment we're taking on. In those cases, we need their fat outranking their protein. If you're trying to lose weight, you're going to feel a lot more full when the fat is higher, and that's really where that first 6 weeks that I talked, just eat the fat for 6 weeks. I need your body eating fat. I need you remembering how good fat tastes. And that can happen pretty quickly as long as their fat is higher than their protein. When you start adding so much protein, first of all, it's not a good fuel. So you're going to want to eat more often. When you've got a good satiated fatty meal, that's how you get to 1 meal a day. That's how the calories really went down, because the volume of food went down, because your endocrine system responded like it was supposed to when you ate. And that's not really, it sounds impossible when you haven't done it, but it's not too far away for people on a ketogenic diet. It is a few steps of improving their metabolism and really getting their palate and those gut secretions that we talked about in the last couple of questions, really to a higher level of performance, that you can eat that fat, you can really absorb that nutrition, and it really spikes the endocrine system to satiate the person, to really give them that comforted feeling of, yes, I am full. She says she wants to lose body fat. So yeah, if you're trying to lose body fat, you want the least amount of insulin possible. Okay, so the question was, are you trying to lose weight? And she wrote back in and says, yes, I'm trying to lose body fat. So in that case, your fat needs to be higher than your protein. Again, both of those substances, protein and fat, stimulate insulin. If you're trying to empty the insulin, if you're trying to empty what insulates you, we need less insulin. Fat will give you less of an insulin response than protein. And having more protein than fat in your ketogenic diet will sabotage your weight loss. That's a solid answer. All right, let me go back over here and say there are a few. I'm going to check my numbers at the end of this show. But if you are watching this on replay, this is our third series of the Atomic Keto. And we will put at the end of the show a link to our playlist for the other two Atomic Ketos. We do want you to join us. We want you to follow along. I really want people to change a behavior for a lifetime, not just enough. Oh, please have enough blood there. Come on. Not just for enough to get the weight off, but really getting to a point where, well, my glucose went down to 92, so that's better. And my ketones, let's see, that's very little blood. I just barely got enough to make it go. 2.0. So yeah, a little better. But 48 hours of fasting, I will call that a night. We are the Dr. Boz Show, reversing medical problems with healthy keto living. Thank you for checking in tonight. We will see you next week. Actually, I have an awesome thing to tell you about next week. Next week is the best video that I've done in a long time. I have parent-teacher conferences next week, so we are going to upload my favorite talk that I gave in Omaha that I swore was on YouTube, and it turned out it wasn't on YouTube. So it's a really long lecture. It has lots of slides. It has lots of science. It will go live and premiere at the time we do our live next week, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Signing off as a Dr.